Hi, I'm Nick Ashron. Welcome to Lightworker's Guide to the Galaxy on the road. Slightly different to my normal show because here I am travelling around the country interviewing wonderful people, and this week's guest is a really special guest of mine, a real friend of mine. I'd like to introduce you to the wonderful Patricia Cori.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
Now, I first heard of you before I met you. Because I came across this really interesting book that grabbed my attention, more so because of the geometric design on the cover. It was a 12-pointed star.
No more secrets.
That's the one. And I'd been working with some of those ideas of the 12-pointed star. I even featured it on one of my albums. Did the album cover based on the 12-pointed star. So I was immediately drawn to this book, No More Secrets, No More Lies, and I thought, this is intriguing. Looked on the back, and it said, a handbook for starseeds. Oh right, definitely got to buy this one. And the thing was that the information in that book so resonated with my understanding of the journey that I've been on as a psychic artist and what I've become aware of. So subsequently I read that book, fascinated by it. I then read one of your other books, Atlantis Rising.
My favourite.
Equally enjoyed that. And then I saw your name on the Glastonbury Symposium. I thought, I got to go down. I got to just say hello. Do you remember that first meeting?
Yeah, I remember that you walked up to me and said, "Oh, Patricia, I don't know if you've got any time. I'd really like to talk to you a minute." And I said, "Are you Nick?"
I know. Freaked me out completely.
It did freak you out. You were like, "Oh."
How'd you know? How'd you know? And you said, well, I am a psychic, you said. And that was it, really, wasn't it?
Yeah.
We kind of really connected.
Instant karma.
And I know that one of the interests that you have is with the crop circles, which we'll kind of come back to in a little bit. But it was, we kept bumping into each other, didn't we?
Yeah, that one time I think we bumped into each other at every single crop circle, at the airport and maybe at the not a hamburger stand, definitely at a cafe or two.
I know. And so, thus our friendship was born, wasn't it?
Yeah. I think it was kind of born probably way before we ever met, somewhere on the galactic plane, but definitely in that moment when I said, "Are you Nick?" there was a big spark.
So, where would you say your journey in, because I know that you're a spiritual teacher, and I know that you channel, or whatever term you like to use, you have communication. Where did that journey start for you, would you say?
Well, it started as a child. I was a psychic child, and I had contact with beings then, but they presented themselves as little sparkly, I used to call them the blue people.
Oh, okay.
And fortunately my mother was my record keeper, because I was too young to remember when I told her that the little blue people would come and sit on the leaves and talk. And she would say, "What do they say?" And I'd say, "Well, they say I'm not from this galaxy." And "Where are you from, sweetie?" Because this is many moons ago, when children didn't have access to our, let's say, wealth of information we have now about the galactic realities. And so she was a little bit taken back. And I told her the little blue people said that I came from an alternate galaxy, and they told me about Atlantis. And fortunately I had this extraordinary mother who pursued that and let me talk about it.
Okay, yeah, because often the case is, and there's many children, isn't there, that have come out with some extraordinary things.
Sure.
But the parents kind of, it's all your imagination, and dismiss it.
Yeah, stop talking about that now, which is, children, it's understandable that children are still in touch with their past lives many times too, because they're just new arrivals, right?
Sure.
But at any rate, she really encouraged that. I explore that. And then, like any child, you get sucked up into school and trained not to be in tune, but it was always there. But the really profound contact that I've enjoyed and been honored to have with the Syrian vibration kind of kicked it back off in the famous Julia set amazing crop circle at Stonehenge in 1996.
Yeah, and there's an interesting story with that, because it was claimed that some pilots flew over that area and there was no crop circle, and flew back sort of 15, 20 minutes later, and there was this
Yeah.
formation right across the road from
Stonehenge, the most visited site in.
Busy A303 road, and this was in daytime.
Well, the story, there are a number of stories. Some people say it was 45 minutes, some 30. I've never heard it 15 before,
Right.
but at any rate, there's no question that there's evidence that some pilot flew over, and that 151 circles in Fibonacci sequence, in perfect Fibonacci sequence, came down within, let's even stretch it and say an hour. And the interesting thing about this is that I was studying color therapy in England, and I had this vision of this formation, perfectly imprinted, exactly. In the dream, I had Stonehenge, and then this spiral, I called it a gigantic spiral, many times the size of Stonehenge. And when I first went to Glastonbury for the weekend, we had a weekend off, and there it was sitting on the wall in a bookshop, and I was quite taken aback, because until then I hadn't really understood the crop circle phenomenon. This is back in 1996.
Yeah.
So there it was, my dream in print, and we excitedly, I was with a group, so we excitedly brought this back to the college. And when one of the professors saw the diagram and the picture, because I had drawn this diagram, he said, "You have got to get into this crop circle." And the interesting thing is that a voice in the dream had told me, "Pay attention, this is an interdimensional lock-on point, and it's going to be extremely important to you. You have to remember. And I woke up at the classic 4 o'clock wake-up call moment and scribbled it down. So that was my big breakthrough. Did you go to the Julius?
I went to that one. It was extraordinary. It really was.
It was extraordinary. I saw quite a lot of things going on in that crop circle, but I was taken out of my body as fast as I could get in. It was truly as if some force were pulling the neck of my shirt, pulling me in, and I just barely got in, and fell down and lost consciousness for 2 hours. I recalled this sensation of spinning, nausea, and then a sound of this increasingly high pitch, and then pop, and I had the experience of being sound, which is pretty remarkable. And then pop, and off I went, flying around wherever.
You didn't have any memory of where you went?
The journey. No, I have vivid recall of this whirling, swirling, losing my body, becoming sound. It's very hard to describe what that felt like. And a pop, when it would be like when the NASA craft get out of the Earth atmosphere. So it would be like that surging feeling, and then pop, and then floating in free space. And when I came crashing back down into my body, it felt like I came in, as many people do, off center. And I looked around, and the climate had changed, the light had changed. It was definitely later in the day, and the professor who had brought me was nowhere to be found, and I sat up as best I could. I was completely like nothing I'd ever experienced. And
So how long were you out?
well, he came walking up, and I said, "Oh, I'm so embarrassed. I'm so sorry. I think I might have fallen asleep for a few minutes." He said, "Patricia, you've been out 2 hours."
Wow.
I was like, "Really?" And he said, "Oh, look, are you okay? You look pretty spacey. Try to ground yourself." "Yeah, sure, will do." And he said, "I'm going to go get the car and take your time, and it's quite a walk out. Meet me at the gate," where the farmer had the classic donation box. And when I went out, I saw plasma balls. I saw Men in Black, which was shielded. I recalled it a year later at the Bar Gin, when Steve Alexander came in with a video of something, and he was talking about Men in Black, and poof, the veil was lifted. You know how they do that? They give you a veil.
Okay.
And I remembered these two Men in Black walking past me, and they were like Schwarzenegger, very robotic, blonde, Nordic types. And one of them was holding out a suitcase or briefcase which looked like a Geiger counter. In that state that I was in, I remember thinking, what an odd way to carry something so heavy. They were marching all along together, and with this one with the arm out, and when they passed me, they just stared menacingly in unison, and then stared away and kept walking. And they were the classic Men in Black, which I also didn't know much about then. Didn't know anything about Men in Black then. The 1960s black suit. And when I got to the exit, I said to the farmer's wife who was running the donation box, I guess you get some pretty weird people in here, huh? Like, starting with me. And she said, yeah, a lot of strange things going on here. I said, wow. And I just figured, nah, I'm not going to tell her about the Men in Black. And I looked across the way looking for the professor, and there was the classic 1964 Chevy sedan, black, which later, a year later, when the memory was flooded back, Steve Alexander, who was one of the crop circle photographers, was just talking exactly about that. So there was a lot going on in that formation.
What have you come to think the Men in Black are? Or
Boy, that's a really good question. The best I can come up with is that some interdimensional beings decided that they wanted to imprint or investigate Earth reality, and somehow got a pick back in the 60s and got this idea or imprint of how they should come in. I mean, let's put it this way. If you were to, let's be really phantasmagorical and say that we are going to now project ourselves into another planet where everyone is dressed like lizards. Just kidding. Like, let's say in funny little goofy suits.
Yeah.
You certainly wouldn't,
Sure.
You'd try to amalgamate into the society. So it's interesting. It's as if they're frozen in that time frame. Perhaps even stuck in some kind of a plasma. Who knows? We don't really know much about these other dimensional realities.
Do you get any sense that they're benign or just simply observing?
I get a sense that they're not benign. They're observing and they're threatening.
So you think they have an agenda of their own?
The way that they looked at me was very threatening. It was as if to say, cease and desist. And what their agenda is, I'm not quite sure about. But there have been other people who have actually had contact, like UFO researchers, with Men in Black who actually drive up in vans and intimidate them. So, not sure if they're just disguising themselves as these holographic. I mean, anything's possible, isn't it, in the cosmos of soul?
Yeah.
But this was definitely intimidating. But I don't get scared.
No, and also something extraordinary came out of that experience in that crop circle, didn't it?
Yes, because after about first of all, getting anywhere near being able to be back on Earth took me the longest time, and I had to go back to home. Dealing with the airport and all that just was excruciating. And about 2 weeks after I got home, I got my first wake-up call, which was like at 4 in. I never have been a big fan of automatic writing, mediumship to a certain extent. It's never been my favorite area. And here I am getting messages. The first 3 pages of Cosmos of Soul were me in trance. I walked out the computer after hearing this noise. I sat down at the computer, I typed out whatever, and I went into trance. I woke up with my face smashed on the keys, and like, I don't know how many pages of the same keys. And fortunately I went back and looked at page 1.
So you weren't aware of what you were writing at the time?
Yeah, not the first night. I was in a trance, sort of a trance state. And I had the good sense to go back and, before tossing it, to look at page 1, because it seemed a pretty bizarre experience. And there was the first 3 pages of Cosmos of Soul, which was the first channeled book. So the next day it happened again, and I was conscious, and it just kept coming. And I thought, could I really don't want to serve in this capacity. I'm not really into this. But I made sure that it was not of the highest intention. Cleared, make sure that this wasn't some astral information, lower astral stuff, because I do a lot of energy work, always clearing the root, shall we say. And I just decided, okay, let it go, trust it. And here we are, how many years later? 10?
10 years, yeah.
And 10 books later.
Actually, more than 10, 2000.
That's right. Whoa, 15.
96 was that book.
Shh, don't give away how old we are.
And then you were aware of who the source that was channeling this information at that point, were you?
Oh yes, they announced themselves immediately as the Sirian High Council and explained how the three stellar family of three sister stars, how they were positioned in the multiverse, with Sirius A being the beautiful star that we see at the bottom of Orion's belt, Sirius B having ascended to the 6th dimension where they communicate from, and Sirius C still having ascended into the 4th and still trapped in a number of karmic matters that have not allowed it to go past the 4th dimension.
And where were these beings from, then, the ones that were channeling?
The Sirian High Council from the 6th dimension.
With B, Sirius B?
Yes.
Right, okay. And just, obviously I recommend people read the books. I highly recommend them read the books, but the general gist of their message.
In a nutshell?
Well, I know it's difficult, but I think it's important, yeah.
Well, there are many overriding themes in these books, because there are many books now.
Yeah.
And one of the predominant messages is the description of the invitation for humankind to look closely at what is really going on around us. And of course, at the time they were first coming out, there was a lot more conspiracy than what's happening now, because this information has come to pass. They're very prophetic books. So they're still very timely, because you look at this and you say, oh my God, this is completely unfolding. But at the time, wow, it was pretty out there. So one of the overriding themes is look at it, don't fear it. Here it is, this is what's happening as far as controls on the planet, intervention in humankind's development. One important theme is how we were nested as 12-stranded DNA beings and were stripped of 10 strands of DNA, which more and more people are understanding now.
But and that's even being observed by genetic scientists.
Yes, the scientists. In fact, I think in Russia they've photographed a child now with a 3rd strand eliminated, which is so exciting. But overall, the message is that even though things appear pretty shaky on planet Earth, our planet is going through a revolutionary milestone, as it is going to travel through the astral cords of the sun, and the entire solar system is moving into a higher dimension. And that has some people freaked out, because we can't really imagine such a thing. And I've seen some comments on some of the YouTube pages where they say this woman is out of her mind. On the other hand, Michio Kaku, who is a respected nuclear physicist, quantum physicist, describes this now in quantum physics. And the physicians are starting to say, maybe dark holes are not what we think they are. Maybe they aren't places where everything gets smashed into infinity, back into subatomic soup, but rather maybe they are passages between the dimensions.
A lot of some of the series, like Star Trek and some of the futuristic space programs, are kind of using it in that way, aren't they? As means to travel into other dimensions.
Yeah, well, it makes sense, doesn't it? What if? How do we know that? What's beyond? Isn't this very possibly a wormhole or some kind of a tunnel?
I mean, the interesting thing is, if we look back over our history, such as it is, we can see time and time again things that people thought were absolutely impossible
That's right.
now our normal reality.
Yeah. Well, this is, and then you get the mindset, well, we knew it all along. We knew that it was going to be that. But that's okay, as long as we know. What's important is to start to learn and grow and to embrace the possibility that things are not what they appear to be. Just like back in the days of Copernicus and Galileo for daring to suggest that the Earth wasn't the center of the universe.
Or the Earth was flat even.
Oh, yes, the idea that you would sail off the end of the planet, but they never thought about where you would go. Right? And that's also an interesting idea. Okay, great. So let's say the Earth is flat. What happens when you fall off? They couldn't go there because the Pope would have cut their legs off or something.
Yeah.
So I guess you went to hell, didn't you?
I mean, the thing is, for me personally, when I look back at the things that people thought were impossible, which are now our reality, like for instance, how many people, when they saw the movie Frankenstein, would ever have, in the 50s, would ever have conceived that we could develop a technology where we could recreate another human being. That would have been thought way too far-fetched, yet now we have genetic engineering. But the thing that really strikes me about all of that is that the only reason these things exist is because somebody thought of it. In other words,
somebody imagined it.
Whatever we can imagine can be possible. That's the most important message that gives me.
Mm-hmm.
And in that context, like yourself, okay, yes, we can observe the fear-based, the conspiracy, and be aware of that. We don't have to buy into the fear of it.
Exactly.
Because we are creators in our own right.
Right, but the message from the Syrians is, look at it so that you are allowing yourself to explore what mechanisms are in place now. And by looking at it, you are empowered because you are not afraid to look at it. Look at it. Look right into it. What are you going to do about it? How are you going to affect it? How are you going to change reality? So these books have this beautiful balance of first presenting you with some of the difficult things that humankind is facing, and then reminding you that in the end, you are the creator of reality. And that, like we were talking earlier, or somewhere in a crop circle, about critical mass. If enough spirit beings reached a potential force of light, doesn't matter, even if 8 billion humans are convinced in the exterminator storyline, we will be able to hold that balance.
Yeah, I mean, because like yourself, I run workshops, and the way that I put this across is, yes, observe the stuff, see what's going on, but don't go into the fear.
Exactly.
Because you are a creator in your own right. Hold your vision of the world as you would choose it to be, but the most powerful way that we make that happen is by living it, being a lighthouse. Yeah.
And also, what a waste of energy and time when you've got such a beautiful place. I mean, we're in a Garden of Eden, and despite all of the destruction around us, and there's so much, you can choose to sit and gaze at a bloom, a flower, and marvel in the sacred geometry in it, and take your mind to the question of the perfection of life, or you can wallow in perpetual misery over all the destruction, and that's your choice. And as far as I'm concerned, that defines the heaven and hell paradigm.
One of the things that I stress again time and time for me personally, which I think is really important, is about keeping connected with nature.
Absolutely.
Just be out there, be present in nature, because that is one of the most powerful ways to nurture yourself. And in nurturing yourself and nurturing your well-being, it raises your vibration, doesn't it?
And the vibration of everyone around you.
Because we're all one.
And you just make a test of it and go sit in a park somewhere and sit on the grass compared to being stuck in the traffic, car, office, home. Just spend an afternoon sitting in a field on the grass and see what you get. The music of the birds, the wind, the trees rustling, the smells. We've just become so disassociated from nature that we've gotten completely mental.
Absolutely, and nature's what's real.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, the other thing, of course, that you talk about in your books, and again, a favourite subject of mine, is the star children, the starseeds. Now, I call them star children. They've got other names like indigo, crystal, rainbow children, which to me are just qualities.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree?
Yes.
Just qualities of the star children. A lot of people have forgotten about the flower children.
I'm one.
Because they were, they've been coming in waves, haven't they?
Yes.
Each generation of star children are of a higher vibration than the last, so by increment they raise the vibration here. Yeah, would you agree with that?
Well, I would also say that yes, they're coming in with a different vibration, with a different urgency, or let's say
They're like emissaries.
they're emissaries, and they are coming in with a certain. They have to be ready to deal with what Earth is going to do next. So they're coming in with much more information and a much greater capacity to get to the source. So the Syrians refer to them as the violet oversoul. But we are talking about the same thing, different names or qualities, like you say. And, geez, it's very exciting. People are quite concerned about what will happen if we're going to go through this great transition. What about the children? What's going to happen to the children? Is there any future? And I usually tell people, the children are probably going to help you deal with it, and not the other way around. Don't worry about the children. These are old souls that have agreed to come in and help process this passage.
I did a program about star children, and numerous stories of incredible stories that some of the children have told their parents as soon as they learned to speak. Like one child turned around to her mum and dad and said, I'm not from here. And, what? And started describing this other planetary system completely.
Well, this is what I did with my mother.
Right, yeah, I was going to say that's...
And that was, the interesting thing about that is, that was back in the 50s, not to date myself, but their children had no access to this information then. And there was no library or New Age bookstore where you could really plug into this information. So it was even more shocking to hear from a child. So I don't think it's just these children. I don't think it's this generation. I think that, let's say, 3-4 generations, how would that put us? Children, mothers, grandmothers, even great-grandmothers.
And what I'm saying, because a lot of people think that the star children thing, the indigo thing, is a new phenomenon.
No.
But it's not.
No.
It's been going on much
in
earlier
waves,
back than that. Yeah.
like you said. And it's kind of profound that you would say the flower children were part of that.
And they talk about indigo children, crystal children, rainbow children. That was the flower children, wasn't it?
Yeah,
And they brought the ethos of love and peace. They sowed the seeds of the New Age movement.
very much so.
And one of the things that also, they changed the attitude to people in the West towards the Native Americans, because prior to the 60s, the attitude towards most tribal cultures was a bunch of heathens, right? But the hippie movement was inspired by the Native Americans with the love beads and the flares, and that shifted people's attitude towards the Native Americans in the West. And then people started to actually go, hang on a minute, these guys have got some really valuable information, and gradually, the attitude towards not just the Native Americans, but many
Indigenous
other
peoples in general.
It's like, wow, these guys have really got something.
Sure, because we brought in the Mayan influence and the Tibetan Buddhism, and people were going off in droves to ashrams in India.
Absolutely.
We had a great time.
All the stars of the day, the Beatles and so on, they all started getting into, transcendental meditation, and George Harrison got into the Krishnas, didn't he?
Yeah.
And there really was a sort of boom, a big awakening as people started to explore all these many different spiritual cultures.
Well, there was a huge awakening, revolution,
Absolutely.
and there was also the introduction of the real introduction of the drug culture, which had its negative aspects, but people were taking a lot of LSD back then, so they were having like those outrageous breakthroughs of exploring consciousness on the level of raising your subconscious to the same level as your consciousness, and exploring what really was the human mind. And from that, going from the drug experience. They were leaping off into exploration of on a deeper level.
Yeah.
The soul.
I mean, the thing is, the interesting thing about that is that in the tribal cultures, it's a part of their normal traditions that when you get to a certain age, you're initiated by the shaman or the medicine man into the other dimensions that coexist with this and the ancestors, but they use the local psychotropic plants to induce that initial experience. But it's overseen. It's not just done, oh, let's get higher and have it's a part of their culture to introduce it at that certain age, the awareness that there are these other dimensions, and that becomes a part of their understanding and their connection with nature. In the West, of course, we moved totally away from those sort of traditions. So you could almost say that something was really needed to trigger and wake humanity up. And of course, the guy that invented LSD, he was looking for a cure for schizophrenia, wasn't he? And he was looking at all these different...
Who was the guy that invented it? It wasn't Timothy Leary.
No, it wasn't Timothy Leary.
It was a scientist, wasn't it?
Well,
the government was messing around with. Let's go back. The government was putting people into unbeknownst to them, was using LSD in experiments.
Yeah.
And then it was still legal when Timothy Leary started to play with it. I think he was a psychiatrist.
Yeah, he was.
And he was using it, and then he watching people, analyzing it, and clinical studies on how it affected the conscious-subconscious interaction. Mm-hmm. And then he said, whoa, I'm going to try this, and the rest is history.
Because it does open and expand portions of the brain we don't normally use, and our perceptions are expanded.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, in the tribal culture situation, that you're protected because you're overseen by the medicine man and the shaman, so he's holding that energy. Because when this explosion happened, it was mayhem, wasn't it? It was like, and there were casualties, obviously.
Well, sure, because as you say, in a tradition where the plant is used by generation after generation in holy sacrament, where did that come from? Holy ceremony, honoring the elemental beings, honoring the plant, honoring. There was an environment of, the focus was not on the experience of the drug or the psychotropic passage, but more honoring spirits.
Yeah.
And the drug or plant was a vehicle to reach them. But what happened, like you said, in the explosion of that passage for the West was just no honoring nothing, man. It's like, wow, this is a vehicle to the stars yesterday, and people were abusing it quite a lot. And very little overseeing was done. People were using this in party environments, and unfortunately, when you don't have someone helping you deal with your dark demons, when they appear on the same level as your conscious experience, like it is for us as psychics, I have a lot of times, it's getting harder and harder to discern. What am I really seeing this? Define really. Is this a vision, or is this somebody standing in front of me? Is this a voice, or is somebody standing behind me talking to me? And this is something that takes a lot of spiritual maturity to deal with.
Sure.
So when you take 2 hits of LSD and you've got a cast of characters around you, you can go berserk.
Yeah, yeah. Just want to change the subject now, because I really want to talk about your recent book.
Mm-hmm.
Before we leave.
Before we leave you.
Before we leave you, yes. And tell me how this came about. I know it's messages from
the whales and dolphins.
Yeah.
I was teaching. Now I've channeled now about 7 or 8 books, and I'm partnering a couple of others with other channels. But this was a new experience for me. I was teaching a DNA workshop in Jordan to a rather particular group of people, because even coming in with this kind of information was, in that kind of a society, had its risks as far as how far out there I wanted to get. And in the middle of the workshop, I heard, please help us. In the middle of speaking, I speak with a lot of humor, and when I teach I'm pretty animated, and help! I'm trying to keep my dignity and profile with the people who are in the middle of a story. Please, And suddenly I was projected into the ocean with whales and dolphins thrashing about and crying, and it was really a very bizarre experience, very traumatic for me. Please help us, please, please. Before we leave you was the message. And I interrupted the workshop and I just blurted out, we have to help the whales. And poor people were like, okay, we knew it was dangerous to bring her in. And now she's losing her mind. And I said, please help us. And I called the break in the workshop and ran out. And I was drowning. I had nobody to help me through it. I was just traumatized. And finally got myself back together enough to come back in and teach. Much more sober ending of the day. And when I got back into my room, I turned on the TV, and right in the middle of a news report that 60 whales and dolphins had beached.
I mean, this has been happening a lot, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's happening more and more and more. And that the announcer said, in an apparent suicide, because that's what I got when I was having that experience, that this was choice. We give up. 60 whales and dolphins, and they mentioned that it was unusual that whales and dolphins would beach together, and it's true. It's very unusual in nature. They travel in pods. So that really upset me, because I realized that when I was hearing it was probably actually happening. And
you were actually transported there.
Right there, yeah. And then the timing of the program, they described at what time that it was first. They first started washing up on the beach was exactly the time that I got that hit. A few months later, it happened again. I was awakened in my dreams. Please, help us, before we leave you. I'm like, oh God. I woke up in tears, and I could still hear them screaming. And then my husband, let's call him that, called and said, have you heard the bad news? Would tell me it's not the whales. He said, yeah, there's another 100 gone.
There's dolphins as well, isn't it?
Yeah. And so, again, right in the middle of the timing was right there. So I was being contacted in that hour of duress for reasons that weren't clear to me. And I really didn't want to have to go through it, because all I did was cry. There were about 2 months, but all I did was cry. And finally, I started to receive messages that were coming through the Sirian High Council, because there are whales and dolphins, a committee of whales and dolphins that are part of the Sirian High Council. That really kind of tweaks people's minds, but I've actually seen pictures of whales standing up straight in the water with their fins down. They look very human in some ways. At any rate, they told me that they were serving as a relay station, because all that I could manage to pick up directly from the whales and dolphins was that ultimate psychic experience when you're picking up someone's pain, because I'm an empathic psychic. And so they were serving as a relay station, so the whales and dolphins of the earth were communicating to them, and then they were communicating back down to me as they do in the sessions. And so the book is an outcry from the whales and dolphins of the earth for humankind to get the program and wake up. And in the meantime, they describe their galactic presence and their multi-dimensional presence. They're all over the place. And that their work, their mastery, is to weave light and music through the galaxy, the multi-dimensional universe. And that a big role they have now is to weave the proper harmonics in the solar system, so that when we move through the astral cords of our sun, the planets stay aligned in that passage. It's pretty interesting information.
I've always been given to understand that the dolphins and whales' song holds the fabric of the planet.
That's right.
The etheric planet to go together. So if they're going...
Yeah. Mayday. Well, there are messages. One of the chapters, I think, is called You Are Our Hope. And they and there's been a little bit of a debate about this because I'm getting the first reactions to the book. And some people have said, but if we're ascending, what difference does it make? We're all going together. Why is it a problem if they're leaving? Maybe they're just going ahead. And the message of the book is, many of us have gone already and we will be working on other realms. We have other whales and dolphins working from other dimensions, but there has to be, as you said, critical mass of whales and dolphins present on the planet, weaving the frequencies, the harmonics, to hold the planet together.
So they're saying there's still time.
There's still time is one of the sentences in the book. And, you know, we're getting very close to the 2012 shift, so we're all wondering what time is. And
well, this is the interesting thing, because a lot of the stories of what is happening to humanity now has been put forth in the Hopi Indian prophecies. The Mayan calendar carries that.
Sure.
Many other ancient prophecies have talked about this time of major transformation and wake up for humanity.
we're in it.
And we're in it, absolutely.
I'd just like to also mention that I've just finished a spiritual journey here. You joined me in the crop circles of my group, who send you their love. And there were about 4 days, let's say 3 days, 36 hours of a complete a time warp that we went through. In this time warp, people got to their bed and breakfast a day early or a day late. Somebody walked into this bed and breakfast where I'm staying completely perplexed that he didn't have a room, because he said, I know I booked this date. I had booked the Chalice Well, completely forgot about the access, and had to scramble to try to get in. And the only reason why I could get in when I realized I was off a day, was that another group that was supposed to be in that day completely forgot they were supposed to be there. And it's just like time went, and we came out. Oh. And I think that this is very much part of the 2012 shift. We're already in it, and we're noticeably warping. We have many people saying, gee, the day is so, where does the time go? But in these days, it was just like being on quicksand.
I'm afraid that's happened to us.
Us?
Yeah, because I could talk to you for hours, but our time is kind of...
Oh, what a segue is that?
But thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Nick.
A real delight to have you on the show.
It's an honor.
And I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk again.
Right up.
Thank you.
Thank you, too.
So, how can people get hold of you?
Well, I've got a site, patriciacori.com, but the most information is on my other site, which is Sirian Revelations.net.
So,
and they can get the books.
Yeah, so check that out and join us again next time on Lightworkers Galaxy on the Road. Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you, Nick.